Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. The weather system known as the bomb cyclone has spread its icy tendrils all over this country, plunging much of America into freezing or even sub-zero temperatures. Naturally, these severe lows are being presented to you as proof of course, global warming. We'll have more on that later. But first, Republicans in Congress are demanding an investigation into Christopher Steele. He's the author of the infamous Trump dossier that has dominated politics in this country for an entire year. Fox Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is all over this story, and she joins us tonight. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tucker. This case matters because it's the first known criminal referral from Congress as part of the Russia investigations. The Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, who has oversight for the FBI and Justice Department, along with his Senate colleague, Senator Lindsey Graham, believe there is a violation of 18 U.S.C., which is lying to federal authorities, commonly known as the Martha Stewart statute. According to the letter made public today, the senators believe potential violations for false statements relate to Christopher Steele's distribution of the unverified Trump dossier. A half dozen major media outlets were briefed before the election. Steele was on the payroll of opposition research firm Fusion GPS, whose co-founder is former journalist Glenn Simpson. In the months leading up to the election, Simpson told Steele to brief reporters at least twice after no reporters ran with the story. The project was, of course, funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign. Senator Grassley said the criminal referral is about a perceived double standard. Trump campaign associates were prosecuted for lying to the FBI, and the same standard should apply to others regardless of politics. Tonight, a senior Senate Democrat, Richard Blumenthal, called the referral partisan and said the Russia investigation was triggered by information entirely separate from the dossier. Tucker.
Catherine Herridge, thank you very much for that. Philippe Reines was a longtime advisor to Hillary Clinton, and he joins us tonight. So, Philippe, we've been doing this Russia story for more than a year. I paid pretty close attention. I keep a running list of things we have learned. This is a pretty complete list of what we've learned. Okay, so we've learned that Paul Manafort, kind of sleazy in his business dealings. We learned that Mike Flynn probably should have had a lawyer when he talked to the FBI. We learned that Donald Trump's aides agreed with their boss that we should change our Russia policy, that they called Russian diplomats, as is their prerogative. We learned that Russia bought $100 grand in Facebook ads, and that RT is funded in part by the Putin government. I knew all of that before. Where's the collusion part that justified this whole exercise?
Well, that's the part that Robert Mueller is still looking at. And I don't know why looking at this a year is some kind of crazy long time. Look at Whitewater. Ken Starr took over 4 years to get that done.
Right.
Look at the Benghazi committees. Eight committees took 4 years again.
Is the Whitewater investigation, do you think, a model that you'd like to see replicated?
I think that Robert Mueller was picked for this job because of his dignity and because of his ability to look at the facts. He happens to be a Republican. He was picked by a Republican administration.
I'm not attacking Mueller. No, but look, and he is. You haven't seen this show call for him to be fired or anything like that. I'm more interested in the partisans who've been barking like dogs for the last year about how Russia's subverted our election, our democracy itself is imperiled, Donald Trump was in league with Russia. You know, if any of that were true, I'd be upset about it. None of that turns out to be true, and no one is admitting that they were wrong. It was all a lie. And someone should admit that.
There are two. I don't think that that's true. There are two things here. There is whether Russia meddled in our election, and there is whether Donald Trump's campaign had anything to do that. This is what Robert Mueller is looking at, the collusion part. Let's give him time. He's following the facts. He obviously found something. Mike Flynn, the president's first national security advisor, pled guilty. And not just because he didn't have a lawyer.
What did he plead guilty to? Hold on, slow down, stop. What did he plead guilty to? Did he plead guilty to
perjury?
He pled guilty to lying. Look, I'm not here to defend the impeachment of Bill Clinton or the Whitewater investigation. You lived through both of them, and I think they would have given you a keen appreciation for how far afield these investigations can go and the cost to the American public, not just financial either, to those investigations. So I guess that's kind of the point I'm making. If there's collusion, this whole thing
is... What about Benghazi? Benghazi went on for 4 years, 8 congressional committees, all held by Republicans.
Here's my point.
I don't remember anyone listening.
Look, I'm not here to say that the Benghazi investigation bore fruit. My point is...
So I've gotten 2 admissions out of you tonight.
No, but I've never said anything other than that. The charge here is that the Trump campaign colluded with a foreign government to subvert the democracy of the United States. That's treason. That is a charge that was repeated by a lot of leaders on the Democratic side in Congress, not just crackpots on the internet.
And Steve Bannon.
And maybe Steve Bannon, too. And There's no evidence of it. And isn't it time now for people to start demanding, like, shouldn't we have evidence to back up the outrageous claims that we made?
You don't know what Robert Mueller does or doesn't know. He's doing his job. His job is not to tell us it is just Mueller.
It's the entire American press corps.
No, but nothing else matters right now except for Bob Mueller. This is his job, is to get to the bottom of it.
Does it bother you? Look, in the end...
It bothers me that we won't give him the time and space to do his job.
He's had a lot of time and total space. I mean, he's had an unlimited budget. He can hire whomever he wants. He's under statutorily.
There's no expiration date on this.
Exactly. That's the point.
But people under investigation, targets and subjects, of course they don't like it.
But look, as an American,
you don't get to choose
who's lived through this yourself, would it bother you if at the end of this investigation you get people for crimes committed before the campaign, like Paul Manafort, or you get people like General Flynn, who got caught in a misstatement with the FBI and gets a perjury charge, but there was nobody charged for the core allegation.
So far.
Collusion.
So far.
Do you believe that someone will be charged?
I believe we're going to find out because we're going to give Robert Mueller the time, or he's going to take the time. And there's a difference between Manafort and Flynn and Papadopoulos. These guys, Flynn, what he did was immediately before the campaign and during the campaign. Papadopoulos was during the campaign. These are not 10-year-old charges like they are for Manafort.
The charges themselves, look, I'm not here. The Papadopoulos kid, the Model UN guy.
He's fetch Kafiva for people.
I mean, let's be real, okay? Flynn was a real guy. He was a key foreign policy advisor to the president.
He was national security advisor for 23 days.
That's exactly right. And a key foreign policy advisor on the campaign. Papadopoulos had nothing to do with anything.
Okay, so let's focus on
Flynn. As you know.
And Flynn pled guilty.
Is there any evidence to lying during an interview?
But it's possible that he has told the authorities
but is it possible
something more.
That he's done anything that is actually harmful to U.S. national security, to our traditions of democracy?
Yes,
what would
both
that
legally and
be?
otherwise. I think these guys are lucky that naivete is not criminal, because they allowed for a year the Russians to ping them time and time and time again to play them.
But did they
it's
do
almost
anything,
worse that they might not have realized that.
A single piece of evidence they did something substantially wrong? Not naive, not stupid, not ill-informed, but like, what was wrong? I'm confused.
I think meeting with agents of the Russian government to provide opposition research on a presidential candidate is probably not the most
really would it be
up
there with paying money to a law firm which paid Russian agents for information on which the Hillary campaign
it would be up there with the Republican Party commissioning that report.
It wasn't the Republican Party. It was a
Republican organization.
Yeah, it was a guy who hated Trump, some hedge fund billionaire who didn't like Trump, and then the Hillary people.
Chris Steele, who is he's a renowned British intelligence agent. By the way, Grassley and Graham, this criminal, why don't they have him in open court?
Yeah,
have him in open hearing.
More information.
I think they might be afraid to hear it all.
Philippe, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been almost 4 months since President Trump announced his intention to end DACA. That's Barack Obama's program that hands out work permits to illegal immigrants who arrived in this country as minors. Since that time, lawmakers have been trying to hammer out a plan that would protect DACA beneficiaries from being deported. Now, trying to cut a deal is reasonable, but amnesty should only be given in return for real and long-term immigration reforms. Otherwise, will amount to yet another betrayal, the kind that voters have seen many times over the past 30 years, the kind that got Donald Trump elected in the first place, actually. America deserves real borders and policies that put American interests first, instead of an endless cycle of amnesty coupled with empty promises of future border enforcement at some point, and that's what we've had for a long time. United behind stricter immigration laws should not be a heavy lift for the Republican Party. For one thing, Americans want it. They want it badly. We know that because a new poll by Numbers USA asked likely voters how they felt about various aspects of our immigration policy. And the answers sounded a lot like a Trump campaign speech. Consider chain migration. 57% of likely voters said that if DACA beneficiaries get amnesty, they shouldn't be allowed to bring their family members here. Just 31% of voters disagreed with that. How about the diversity lottery? That's the program that selects 50,000 people every year to enter the United States, gives them visas. They're selected pretty much at random without regard to any qualifications, including English knowledge or job skills or cultural fit. 60% of voters said the diversity visa lottery ought to be abolished entirely. Only 29% supported it. And then there's E-Verify. That's the program that allows employers to check the legal status of people they're going to hire. 57% of likely voters say Congress should require E-Verify for all hiring so that employers can't claim ignorance when they hire illegals. Just 23% disagreed with that. And voters aren't just opposed to illegal immigration, by the way. A strong majority wants to cut all immigration, including legal, across the board. Currently, this country admits about 1 million legal immigrants a year. 60% of those asked said they'd like to cut that number in half, if not more. In political terms, those numbers are huge. Republicans would kill for that kind of support on other issues, all kinds of other issues. Restricting immigration is a lot more popular, for example, than defunding Planned Parenthood or cutting taxes for the wealthy or cracking down on marijuana, bombing distant countries, more popular than all of that. It's also, of course, the main thing that President Trump ran on last year and probably the central reason he won in that upset victory. This should not be hard. Just a month ago, the Republicans united to pass an unpopular tax reform bill. They should be able to come together to pass a far more popular form of immigration reform. Yet somehow that's not happening. In fact, the opposite is happening. Apparently, a number of Republican senators are prepared to cave completely to Democrats on this question, agreeing to amnesty with no serious concessions in return. One proposal would simply delay chain migration rather than ending it, while expanding the scope of the amnesty for DACA recipients and reallocating diversity lottery visas to a different class of unskilled immigrants. Not only would a deal like that hurt the country, voters have said very clearly again and again they don't want it. And this is a democracy after all, or at least it was. You have to listen to what voters want if you're a lawmaker. If you see that kind of deal come out of Congress, and you may, the Republican Party is done. It's over. It's toast. It'll be a short epitaph, too. Suicide. Congressman Sean Duffy is a Republican representing Wisconsin, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thank you for coming on.
Hey, Tucker, it's good to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So these poll numbers are really striking to me because they show that the public is tougher on immigration, including legal immigration, even maybe than the current president was during the campaign. And I'm wondering if this news is filtered down to Republicans in the Congress who seem way more liberal on immigration than their voters.
Well, listen, Tucker, I don't know that the Congress is actually that liberal. At least the Republicans aren't that liberal in Congress. Now, we do have some outliers that wouldn't mind having a DACA amnesty fix without any border security or any fix to chain migration. That's true. But a vast majority of Republicans in the Congress, we stand with President Trump. We want to fix the situation we have with the DACA kids. We think that's reasonable and fair. But in exchange for that, we want to secure a border. We want to build a wall. We want to fix chain migration. We want to fix the lottery system. So, and I got to tell you what, if Democrats don't start to negotiate fairly on this issue, there will be no deal for the DACA kids. So, I get your concern, but I got to tell you what, I sit inside our Republican conferences, and there's a great unity around this issue of fixing the root cause of the problem that continues to bring new people in who, Tucker, they just pack their bags and they decide to come into our country on their own, where we believe that Americans have a right to pick and choose who comes into our country. We want the people that graduate from MIT and Harvard that love America, or even the people that'll come and work up on our Wisconsin dairy farms, where those are jobs that our own people won't take. We need those kind of people who love to work and love our country, but we get to pick and choose them. You just don't get to pack a bag and come across the border and say you're going to be an American and get amnesty.
I mean, pardon my skepticism. So the president runs this campaign that's different from the 17 other campaigns Republicans are running, really in one respect. He's tough on immigration. He says he wants to build a wall. We're a year in. Republicans have unified to pass an unpopular tax bill. They tried to get health care through. They've done all manner of things. They haven't actually gotten together to do that, the one thing he ran on. Why is that?
So listen, I hate to get in the weeds with you, but you know that we could pass a funding bill for the wall in the House. But we can't pass that kind of bill in the Senate. Though Republicans control the Senate, they have this thing called the filibuster rule. You need 60 votes, which means 9 Democrats have to vote for that funding. That becomes very challenging for us. So I would love if Republicans could ram through a funding bill for the wall, but that's just not the reality of politics in the Senate. So we're going to have to leverage DACA in exchange for border security and other immigration reforms. That's just the way the Senate works.
So, I mean,
I don't like it, but that's the truth.
So just to get to one of the key questions in that negotiation, chain migration. So I think most people look at this and say, you know, you came into the country illegally. Maybe your parents brought you here. Maybe you came as an unaccompanied minor, but it's illegal. You shouldn't be allowed to bring all your relatives with you. What percentage would you say of Republicans disagree with that statement in the House?
I think a vast majority agree with the fact that that if you're a DACA child, you shouldn't be able to bring in your parents through chain migration. But let me just take a step back. Tucker, Democrats want these children to become citizens within 5 years, and then through chain migration be able to bring their parents into the country legally who brought the child in unlawfully. This is insane. Listen, Republicans aren't going to stand for that. To your point, Republicans might not have run on immigration reform, but the poll numbers that you cited and the success of Donald Trump have made it very clear that we can have a stronger backbone and actually fight for immigration reform that works for the country. And that's one of the benefits of Trump and him driving a message about equity and fairness in immigration reform. So I think the Republicans are going to hold the line, and just if they don't, and I think we will, but if they don't, Donald Trump won't sign any legislation that doesn't have a border wall funding component to it. He's not going to sign it.
I don't know about that. I mean, I really don't know the answer, but I do know, I'm totally convinced we got Trump in the first place because Congress ignored what voters wanted for like 30 years, and it made people mad. Congressman, thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Tucker.
The FBI tonight renewing its investigation of the Clinton Foundation, which still exists. We'll have more on that ahead. Plus, we'll ask activists why they treat every type of weather as proof that global warming is real. Is it? So we're in the middle of something called the bomb cyclone weather event. Not clear to come up with that name or what it means, but here we are. It sent temperatures plunging all over this country. The severe cold has prompted assertions that it is the product of global warming. Claims like that are a recurring theme in American life in recent years.
The speed that climate change is happening is caused by humans. Instead of happening on timescales of millions of years, or let's say 15,000 years, it's happening on the timescale of decades and now years.
Should have mentioned climate change as a national security threat because it is.
Why then is the Arctic ice shelf melting? Why are the sea levels rising? Why are the hottest temperatures in the last decade essentially the hottest temperatures that we've seen on record?
It does seem like climate change is happening faster than we thought in some ways. It seems societally that maybe we're more vulnerable than we thought.
The entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
So in case you're keeping track at home, low temperatures are proof of global warming. So are high temperatures, heat waves. Also hurricanes are, but droughts are too. So hot or cold, wet or dry, all of it is proof that human activity is making the climate hotter. The question is there any weather phenomenon that doesn't prove global warming? Josh Fox follows us carefully. He's a documentary director and environmental activist, and he joins us. Josh, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, it's great to be on again with you.
Thank you.
You said everything that you just said was true. That was amazing. You had like a whole run there.
Let me just say at the outset, I'm not here to debate you. I don't really know what my position is. I'm open-minded because I believe in science, and I think that evidence ought to lead to conclusion, not the other way around.
That's miraculous.
But why wouldn't I be a little bit confused if people say that hot temperatures are a sign of global warming? Now they're saying cold temperatures are, wet conditions are, but also dry conditions. How can that all be true?
Again, you're not really stating it correctly. I think what people are saying about the bomb cyclone is it is a similar weather event to a hurricane, which is true. What climate change does as a result of warming is it increases the extreme weather events, right? Extreme cold, extreme hot. But in this case, we're talking about extreme storms, right? Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey. These were unprecedented and incredibly disastrous events in terms of the climate, and this bomb cyclone is very similar. Now, in the scientific terms,
just to stop. And I just want to make sure I have this right. And I want to make it clear, you're not a scientist, so be sure not to patronize me. Just give me a straight answer. I was told for the last 15 years that global warming, its main result was higher temperatures. So can you see why I'd be confused?
We are seeing higher temperatures.
So, but if this turns out to be an unusually cold year, and it looks like it may, how can that also be?
It's cold in New York. It's cold in New York. You're in New York. I'm in Louisiana. And in fact, yesterday I was in St. Thomas where it was 80 degrees. And that's the point. The hurricanes and the cyclones start with a warming Atlantic. When the Atlantic Ocean is warmer, it evaporates more water into the air. When you have more water in the air, more water comes down. So you saw this huge deluge with Harvey. You saw all of this wind and rain with Irma and Maria, and now you're seeing huge amounts of snow because of the warming temperature in the Caribbean.
Wait, but I'm
right?
confused.
You know
Okay,
that
so
these
we're
storms
seeing a
come
lot
up
of
from
snow.
Florida, right? We know that, right?
But it was
Tucker?
just, I'm not sure what we know. Because
I'm explaining to you the
hold on, let me just
science.
ask
Now, you asked me about science, right? So I'm explaining to you the science.
I don't know how much you know about science, and I know that I don't know much about science.
I have a map right here of the whole world temperatures, right? Now, you'll see the blue right there. That's North America. That means it's colder than average. But if you look at the rest of the planet, it's warmer than average. That means when you talk about global warming, you look at the entire globe.
Okay,
not just New York City. When it's like, you can say, I live in New York City, so it's colder in New York City. That's not an argument. That's why we keep records. That's why the Farmer's Almanac keeps track.
I get it, but let me just ask you a question. You're filibustering because I think you're fearful of answering a straightforward question. And so here's one. So it was 4 years ago, the New York Times, in a piece that I remember reading, predicted, and I'm quoting, the death of snow because of global warming. Global warming was going to end snow in the United States. Then 3 years later, we had record snows. That was last winter, and they said another effect of global warming. During that same period, they wrote a piece saying that the overabundance of ice in Antarctica was a sign of global warming. And then 3 years later, they say a lack of ice is a result of global warming.
First of all, what you're saying is absolutely not true.
Well, it is true. I can cite it right here.
It's not true, Tucker. It's not true. And listen, let me tell you something.
Well, what's not true about it?
Can I tell you the reason why I care about this?
No. I want to get specific. I don't want to get general.
I just spent the entire Christmas holiday on St. Thomas, which is a town that was an island that was completely ravaged by Hurricane Maria and Irma. There are people who have no electricity. There are people who have no home. There are people who lost loved ones.
You're eliding over
and
my
the reason
question.
why people care about climate change.
You're making a general statement. I want to be very specific. And
your
can you just
question is
respond to my specific question?
Your question has no basis in science. You're saying, oh, well, we have one article here and one article there. What I'm trying to point to
saying that the same people are making contradictory claims.
Global climate records. And the reason why I'm on your program right now is because over this last decade, I've been exploring fracking and exploring and investigating climate change. Why? Because I don't want people's children in harm's way. I don't want our military in harm's way.
Now you're making
James Mattis,
what you're doing is calling attention to your own moral virtue. You've departed science.
The Secretary
I'm asking
of Defense,
you specific
James Mattis,
questions.
in the Trump administration believes
all of you guys
that climate
immediately
change,
go when asked a simple question. You go to, I'm a good person. I care.
Like I asked you the last time, do you understand the science behind climate change? Do you understand?
It's too frustrating. Thank you. Tried to get an answer. Couldn't. Well, the hits keep coming for the NFL. Ratings are down. Players are kneeling. Concussions are scaring more people than ever. Now, Barstool Sports, honestly, one of the best sites on the entire internet, is suing the NFL for stealing a slogan. We are honored to have the head of Barstool, Dave Portnoy, here next. Another installment tonight of Drugged. That's our ongoing look at the opioid crisis that is killing more Americans than the entire Vietnam War did every single year. Percocet is one of the more popular opioid painkillers and one of the most commonly abused. The musician Prince was addicted to Percocet. It almost certainly contributed to his eventual death from a fentanyl overdose. Percocet is a legitimately dangerous drug, and yet in recent years, popular musicians have begun promoting the abuse of it. Last year, for example, the rapper Future released a song called Mask Off, which mentions Percocet no fewer than 18 times, and not in a critical way. The song peaked at number 5 in the Billboard charts. Its music video has received more than 230 million views on YouTube. In effect, it's an ad for Percocet aimed at a very young audience, and it's far from the only one. The song Gucci Gang by Lil Pump, Grammys by Drake, we could go on. You may not listen to that music yourself, but your kids and grandkids likely do. Imagine if this were happening with cigarettes. A top 5 hit telling kids to smoke Newports, for example. People would be horrified, and rightly so. R.J. Reynolds, which makes Newports, would respond immediately. There would likely be congressional hearings into the effect on children's health. But when artists promote Percocet, no one in authority seems to notice. That's odd, considering that opioid overdoses kill far more young people than cigarettes do. In a lot of places, they kill more than car crashes and gunfire, too. Drug ODs are the leading cause of death for Americans under 50. Endo Pharmaceutical owns the trademark for Percocet. They profit from its sale. The company has to know that recording artists are promoting their product to kids. How could they not know that? Yet they've said essentially nothing about it. They haven't attacked any performer for pushing Percocet. They haven't threatened legal action either, though a lawyer we spoke to today said that Endo would have a real case. We contacted Endo Pharmaceutical about this afternoon. They responded, but only with mindless boilerplate that didn't address the question we asked. Here's part of what they said. Quote, Endo is dedicated to providing safe, quality products to patients in need, and we share the public concern regarding opioid abuse and misuse. Percocet is an FDA-approved product prescribed by a physician for its intended use. Endo does not promote the product, end quote. Well, there's at least one honest line in there. Endo does not promote Percocet. Rap stars do it for him. Well, it hasn't been a great year for the NFL. Ratings are down. Protests are widespread. The president is hostile. Yesterday, the president tweeted a picture of a woman mourning by the grave of fallen soldiers and wrote this, "So beautiful. Show this picture of the NFL players who still kneel." Now the NFL has a lawsuit to worry about, too. Barstool Sports, one of the great sites of the internet, is no friend of the league. They're banned from Super Bowl media days. They were once arrested, some of the reporters were, for protesting outside the NFL headquarters in the wake of the Deflategate controversy. Now Barstool says the NFL stole their slogan, Saturdays are for the boys, and used it to hawk team shirts. Dave Portnoy, El Presidente, is the president of Barstool, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Portnoy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So what's this lawsuit about?
Well, the NFL put on a whole line of T-shirts out that we feel directly infringe upon our Saturday for the Boys trademark. And the NFL has no problem suing everybody when they think they've even sneezed at what they're doing. So yeah, we decided we'd fight back on this one.
Did they give you a heads up before stealing your slogan?
They did not. I think that would ruin the steal. No, we just saw them. We were surprised by them. And then we sent the cease and desist out.
I mean, the NFL is one of the biggest commercial operations in the world. You're a website. Why wouldn't they just pay you for it?
Apparently they thought they could just take it. Or they didn't think we'd notice, possibly, which I don't know how it's possible because we hate them and they hate us.
They arrested your reporters. Why'd they do that?
So we were protesting Tom Brady, the 4-game suspension he got because we didn't think there was any due process. He wasn't found guilty. Right. And Roger Goodell at one point said he'll talk to the media at any point. So we went and tried to talk to him when he wouldn't meet with us. We handcuffed ourselves to each other in the parking lot, as you see there. And then we got hauled off to jail.
Was it worth it?
It is now. It's worth it now. When we're in jail, jail's pretty bad. I'd never been in jail before. So if you ask me during jail, I say no. Post-jail, yes.
Yeah, it changes a man. You got to do the time. You can't let the time do you.
Yeah, it hardens you up.
It does. So let me ask you a broader question, since I read your site and I admire it. I'll admit it, not to be a fan.
Nothing to be ashamed of.
Is it tough to run a site like that? Your site's popular because it's honest, actually. Totally honest, inoffensive, and irreverent. Is it hard to run a site like that right now, where you're not allowed to be honest and everyone's required to lie about everything all the time?
It's getting tougher. I'll give credit to, the people. I've been running it for a while, and I sold half of it. They like the voice. They like the authenticity, and that's what works. So we just stick with it. But it is more tricky because no matter what you say, there's somebody who's going to, bang their fist, scream, whatever. So it makes it a little more complicated.
They say, they pay you all this money because they say they like the voice, and they probably secretly do. But then when people complain, companies don't stand up for editorial freedom in this environment, do they? Do your corporate masters really stand firm against complaints?
Yeah, they really do, because for the most part, we're able to monetize through our audience, and the advertising is great. The advertising is what is at the core of everyone crumbling, basically, for the most part. You're worried about losing that. Our revenue stream is made on T-shirts and events and speaking to our consumers directly, so that gives us some more freedom than maybe other companies.
Have you noted, does this seem like a hard moment to make art? That requires free thinking, and that does seem in short supply right now.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very difficult time. We were lucky enough we had already built our voice and had this large fan base. But yeah, to start from scratch, especially with social media, I feel like social media amplifies everything because, 10 to 20 people can make it seem like they're actually speaking for a much larger crowd when they're not.
That's right. Yeah, it'd scare the heck out of corporate people. Dave Portnoy, thank you very much.
Barstool Sports.
Appreciate it. The FBI renewing its investigation of the Clinton Foundation. What does that mean for the foundation, for the Clinton empire? That story next. The FBI tonight taking another look at the Clinton Foundation, searching for evidence the foundation may have taken donations, brace yourselves, in return for political favors. Trace Gallagher has more on that story. He joins us tonight. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, Fox News has learned the U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI have been looking into the Clinton Foundation for months. They're focused mainly on pay-to-play politics, and we're told a key witness was interviewed in December dealing specifically with any comparisons between donations to the Clinton Foundation and government actions while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. That's the first investigation. There is also Hillary Clinton's private email server. The Hill has now published a report featuring former FBI Director James Comey's original draft on the investigation, which uses the term gross negligence and says there was evidence Clinton committed a felony. Anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok reportedly softened the language in Comey's draft so Clinton could avoid criminal charges. The DOJ is exploring whether to reopen the probe. The Justice Department is also asking FBI agents to explain evidence gathered in the now dormant Uranium One investigation. The DOJ is deciding if a special counsel might be needed. Uranium One is the 2010 transaction where the Obama administration allowed the sale of U.S. uranium mining facilities to Russia's state-run energy giant. The Hillary Clinton-led State Department was among the 9 U.S. agencies that approved the deal. Finally, there's a potential probe into allegations the Obama administration tried to secure the Iran nuclear deal by ending a federal investigation into the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah. But ending the investigation reportedly led to Hezbollah trafficking hundreds of millions of dollars of cocaine into the U.S. and building up their base of terror. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State at the time. The Clintons claim these are all efforts by Trump to divert attention from Robert Mueller's special counsel. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher. Thanks a lot, Trace. Congressman Matt Gaetz is a Republican who represents the state of Florida. He joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on. So, I don't know if you can hear me, Congressman, but if you can.
I got you, Tucker. Just heard you.
Excellent. Thanks. So the Clinton people are saying, look, you know, Hillary Clinton has been a private citizen for a long time. She's been out of politics, in effect, for a year. Why now? What's the significance of these, do you think, for the rest of the country?
There may have been acts that occurred at the State Department as a consequence of bribes paid to the Clinton Foundation, which are creating an ongoing security concern for the United States of America, Tucker. Take, for example, the Hezbollah story you just mentioned. It's not just cocaine that's being trafficked. You've got Hezbollah working in common cause with narco traffickers in South America to move opium, to move heroin, to move people into the United States. And the investigation that was going on to degrade these networks, to degrade the collusion between Hezbollah and South American narco traffickers was smothered by people at the Justice Department. And there is a suspicion that the State Department, led by Hillary Clinton, had a role in limiting the American people's access to information about Hezbollah being funded and their operations in this country because they wanted the Iranian nuclear deal so bad they didn't want us focusing on the fact that Iran has funded over 100 mosques in South America to recruit people and then to send them to the United States to do harm.
So that's one of the investigations into that, and it does seem, if true, first of all, it's hard to defend, but second, it has obvious national security implications for this country. Tell us about the investigation, to the extent we know much about it, into the Clinton Foundation.
Well, the accusation is that the Clinton Foundation was merely a money laundering operation where people paid in order to have access to the State Department. And there were notations on particular documents and bids where people would write FOB, friend of Bill, which means those were donors to the Clinton Foundation. And as a consequence, they were given special treatment. That's the type of thing that we have to know about now, not to exercise some revenge on a defeated presidential candidate, but to ensure that we don't have people right now acting as vendors on behalf of the United States of America, not as a consequence of their merit or what they can do, but because they're friends and potentially donors to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, well, I mean, that whole operation was false from day one, obviously. Why is it taking so long to get these investigations underway?
You know, we've been calling for this for over 5 months. 20 members of the House Judiciary Committee sent a letter to Attorney General Sessions saying that we've got to look into these things because of the ongoing security concerns. And finally now, we have Hillary Clinton dealing with investigations cascading down on her like it's a bomb cyclone. I think the day's coming soon, Tucker, when we'll be sending an I'm with her t-shirt to Hillary Clinton's cellmate.
Yeah, I mean, so you think that she is criminally exposed potentially?
Absolutely. Look, if people were taking bribes and then as a consequence of those bribes engaging in actions that they would not otherwise be engaging in, that is a crime. You cannot do that in the United States of America, and we've got to go now and remedy the consequences. Take, for example, the subject of your show tonight, the opioid problem. If you had people trafficking and would have been found out otherwise, we've got to now go back and remediate the harm that the Clintons caused this country.
Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Math tests, English tests, privilege tests. That's right. School children now getting quizzed on their privilege and facing shame if they have too much, according to their teachers. The details next. We have new developments tonight in the investigation into the Mandalay Bay shooting. In a statement released just moments ago, MGM said that staff at Mandalay Bay interacted with shooter Stephen Paddock more than 10 times in the days leading up to the massacre, the one in which he killed 58 people. In response to media questions, MGM said this, quote, there were numerous interactions with Stephen Paddock every day at the resort, including a room service delivery and a call with housekeeping on October 1st, all of which were normal in nature, end quote. We'll continue to follow this story, of course. Well, schools aren't just for teaching math, reading, or science, and to be honest, they haven't been for a long time. But now they're also teaching kids to feel ashamed of their families. 158th graders at Badger Middle School in West Bend, Wisconsin, were recently given a privilege test that identified them as being privileged for being white or rich or having an intact family. This is common, by the way, in schools across the country. School officials at Badger Middle School said that privilege education was important to enable the students to succeed in their careers somehow. Nell Daly is a psychotherapist, and she joins us tonight. Now, thanks for coming on. This strikes me, and I've seen this before, I've seen it with my own kids, it seems cruel. Children are, as you know, very sensitive about being called out as different, and that's exactly what this does. And it singles out some kids and basically suggests that they're bad for things they can't control. Why would they do this to children?
Well, I would have to respectfully disagree with you here. This, as a journalist, let's just put this into context. They gave this test in an English class after the students read To Kill a Mockingbird. And what they were doing was discussing Jim Crow laws. So it's very difficult for teachers to teach history, U.S. history and world history, without talking about privilege and how positions of privilege, when they're abused, can lead to really horrible crimes being committed to humanity.
But I'm confused. So these are middle schoolers in Wisconsin in 2018. To Kill a Mockingbird is about Mississippi in the 1940s. What do their families have to do with that? Like, literally nothing.
It wasn't their families. What they were talking about is whether or not kids recognize what kind of privilege they have in the society by being who they are. For example, perhaps white, perhaps male. And it's teaching children that they need to have compassion for people who are on the other side of whatever they are, and to also not abuse that position of privilege moving forward in their lives.
Oh, so they're scolding the kids for things they can't control, like their race or the condition of their family. I mean, by the way, isn't this...
I don't believe anybody was actually scolded, and in fact,
but the implication is, look, you have a special responsibility to be sensitive because of something you can't control. And by the way,
absolutely.
You really
and Tucker, if we didn't teach children this at this point, right, then we're going to raise little boys who end up becoming producers and executives at large movie studios who then end up committing crimes against women like rape. We need to teach children how to be really compassionate towards other people and to be much more sensitive to not abusing their positions of power.
How is this compassionate to single out little kids?
They're not little kids. So
they're
in fairness,
middle schoolers.
these children, no, they're middle schoolers. So by the time the children are in the 8th grade.
But hold on, how is it compassionate to make them feel bad for their race or their family situation. This does make them feel bad. It's happened to my kids.
Tucker, this is talking about shame and vulnerability is a crucial part of the classroom, and it's interesting what the parents. Yes, because what the parents were saying was that
are the teachers qualified to do this?
You've sat through U.S. history classes, you've sat through world history classes.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing. Hold on, I'm not sure that being a middle school history teacher gives you, first of all, the right to talk to my kids about their family and to make judgments about their family, A. B, are they really qualified to navigate something this delicate? Does a bachelor's degree in history give you the ability to do this, to tackle the nuances here effectively? I'm not sure. I'm not convinced.
As a psychotherapist, I read the actual survey, and some of the questions, I agree with you, were a bit bizarre, and I didn't understand them. But asking children to recognize where they hold positions of power because of their race or their gender is really important, and it's very difficult for teachers
I would correct you by saying it's really stupid, actually, because the idea that all people of one race are empowered and people of another race are disempowered is, first of all, factually wrong.
You're making this binary. This is a very nuanced conversation.
I'm not making it binary.
When you talk about the Civil War, when you talk about World War II, how do you talk about those kind of world history events where many people were killed, where blood was actually spilled because of race, because of politics? You can't not bring this stuff up with kids in a classroom.
Right. And I'm not suggesting that you don't bring it up. That's not at all what I'm saying.
That's what the teachers are doing. The teachers were hoping.
Well, hold on, slow down. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't say to kids that somehow you're implicated in it. The Civil War took place 150 years ago. It has nothing to do with the kids at Badger Middle School in Wisconsin.
No, that's not what the survey was saying. The survey was saying, do you recognize where you hold a position of power? And the thing that's interesting is what gets triggered.
But this is, hold on, this is subjective. This is totally subjective. I mean, I could say let's be totally real here. It's not always true that the white guy is the most powerful person in every situation. That's a gross generalization, actually.
I agree with you, but let's just say, for example, that men still make more money than women across many industries in this country. That's a position of power because you're a male in this society. And it's true if we look at...
That's just not actually true, though. I mean, I don't know. I'm not faulting you. I know you're a shrink, not an economist, but you may not be keeping current with the actual numbers on this. That's not actually the whole story, but that's a whole another conversation. I'm saying, why is it not okay just to have teachers teach history and English and math? We're turning out generations of illiterates. Why wouldn't we stick to those things?
Well, you have to teach history. You also have to teach why these things occurred in U.S. history. And part of that is an emotional conversation. You cannot talk about the Civil War, Jim Crow laws, without it becoming emotional.
Yeah, apparently not. I can. Nell, thank you.
All right.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
We'll be right back.
Okay.